Good afternoon. This is Comparative Politics final presentation for Dr. Curry. My name is Chris Barrett. This is on the dispute of federalism versus justocracy and how the two apply, giving examples, and then the pseudo-Christian viewpoint of it. Federalism is what we have here in the United States. Federalism is the ability to have elected officials that govern our country, that we put our trust in these officials with what we feel is the best for us. This gives the population and as individual voters the ability to elect officials that best represent what we believe in. Sometimes we are able to find candidates that we feel suit our beliefs fully. And sometimes it's really hard to find officials that represent what we believe in at all. That's what democracy is sometimes. You're never going to find a candidate that has everyone on their side, especially with the way that our country seems to be divided between the thought of Democrat and Republican, especially in today's world. When it comes to the United States, we have three branches of government. The legislative branch is made up of Congress. You have the House of Representatives, and you have the United States Senate. In order for a bill or a law to pass, it has to be voted upon and agreed upon by both the Senate and the House before it even reaches the president's desk. Once it reaches the president's desk, he can either sign that or he can veto it, which is sent back to the Congress for more vote. This is where this differs from bureaucracy. Under federalism here in the United States, we have our elected officials create the bill. They then vote the bill into law. But it is up to the unelected officials to decide whether or not the law falls under the Constitution. Here in the United States Supreme Court, it is not comprised of people that are voted upon. These are not elected officials. The way this works is we elect the president once a seat on the Supreme Court comes open. It is then recommended and appointed. And that is how the Supreme Court is appointed their officials. These appointed officials are charged with determining how well the government is operating within the Constitution. If there is a law or bill that is put into place, the Supreme Court will look at the law or bill, and it'll determine whether this law or bill is operating or fits in with the Constitution in the way that it was meant to do with our founding fathers. If it violates the Constitution, then the Supreme Court is going to quickly let us know, and it is going to be nullified. When it comes to federalism in the U.S., all these branches are to work together, and under the Constitution, this is a system of checks and balances. That way that we can make sure that the government is operating without one set of the government having too much power. This was something our founding fathers pushed for after the colonists fought the oppression of the British rule. No one branch of government should have all power, and all branches should work together for the greater good of the country, and making sure that the Constitution is followed and the freedoms and the human rights are established and followed. Now, bureaucracy differs from federalism in that while there are still elected officials that represent the people, the laws would come from only a judicial type of system. Where we have a Congress create and birth the law, bureaucracy has the laws created, determine it, and everything done within the court system itself. In a bureaucracy system, elected officials have no say as to what laws are being presented, how they're being represented, and how they're being put into place. Bureaucracy is still considered democracy, and like federalism, there is still a constitution and there are still elected officials, the judicial system holds all the power. When looking at examples of countries that fall under bureaucracy, Israel is a great example. And in a article by James Grant in The Rise of Bureaucracy in Israel, Israel is one of the most extreme examples. And Iran Barak was the Israeli Supreme Court president from 95 to 2006. He once stated, "Nothing falls beyond the purview of judicial review. The world is filled with law, and anything and everything is filled with justifiable evidence." The Israeli government believes that all decisions that are to be made when it pertains to law and the foundation of well-being of the country must come from the court system and have judicial review in everything that happens. Like we talked about, the elected officials really have no say. Everything that comes into play in Israel is when it comes to law or when it comes to making sure that what laws should be put into place, what shouldn't, how the country is run when it comes from a standpoint of that. It's all made by a judiciary branch, such as like the one we have is with the Supreme Court. Grant, in his article, also goes on to talk about how Britain is one of the last remaining countries to not have a written constitution for its country to follow. The protection of the basic human rights for the citizens is contingent upon the democratic will of Parliament. Basically meaning that it is more flexible of a constitution, and it is determined by the Parliament. Allowing the court system, much like a Supreme Court in the United States that we have today, the Parliament's more like the judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to having full power to develop and determine law, and is stripping constitutional rights that go along with democracy. By not allowing the elected officials to be the voice of the people, those rights are infringed upon. What that does is it doesn't allow the elected officials, the people that the citizens and the overall population vote into elected official positions, they're not held responsible. They're not the voice that we are putting them in there to be. An example would be here in the United States, if the lawmakers in Congress pass a law that we, the people, doesn't believe is for the betterment of the country, the people under federalism has the right to vote these elected officials out of office for people that better understand what is needed. Under bureaucracy, judges make the law, develop it, and aren't held accountable like elected officials are. Like we said, these judges aren't elected, these officials aren't elected, they're appointed. And this gives the opportunity for them to be more controlled, because they can be considered to be at-will employees of sorts. And as we've seen back whenever William McKinley was put into office by the big players, big money players in back in the day, such as the Rockefellers and Vanderbilts, he was controlled. It was done so that way an agenda could be made and be a betterment for the upper class. This is kind of like bureaucracy is kind of like that. It doesn't mean that that's going to happen that way, but it has the potential to be that way, because these people aren't held accountable as such as like the elected officials are. When looking at federalism and bureaucracy from a biblical worldview, federalism allows for the right of the people to be fully given to them. The right to freedom, the right to free speech, and the right to elect representatives that represent your values. Federalism allows you to pursue happiness through religion and your own way of life. Now, we talked about bureaucracy. It does have human rights, and it does have the Constitution. It does have democracy. But when you start taking basic human rights away from the citizens, where they have the ability to hold the officials that they vote in accountable for what they do, does it has the potential to stop there? I mean, at some point, does determining what laws get put into place solely by people that are appointed, does it stop at just laws? Could we start to see at any time a spiral to where little by little more and more rights are stripped from citizens by people who could be highly influenced, by people that may or may not have the best interests of the many at the forefront when determining these laws? Under federalism, the citizens have the loudest voice that can be heard, especially during election time, and they have the opportunity to steer our country the right or wrong way. So then it makes it our fault as the citizens, the ones that have the freedom, the ones that pursue the happiness, the ones that want to see the economy, the way of life that we live here in the United States go the way that we need it to. Whereas under bureaucracy, that is not the case, and sometimes the citizens are relying on people who don't understand what it's like to scrape up change in order to feed themselves or their family. They don't know what it's like to pay the power, to have to make a decision to pay the power bill or the water bill because you can't afford both. They're done by people mainly that, and not all the time, not all elected appointed officials don't come from families that are well off, but a lot of times they do, and they don't know what it's like to live an everyday life for the working man. So those are the people that are making your decisions for you. We hear all the time, especially where I'm from, college isn't affordable for a lot, and to go on and do not only basic schooling from college, like your undergrad, law school is definitely not cheap, and most people from where I'm from, it's hard to get college paid for when it comes to that. So a lot of the people that you see that go into to become judges and lawyers and do that lawmaking career path, they come from wealthy families. That a lot of them don't understand what it's like to live the life of struggle. So that's just what some lawmakers, they may not understand that. And when you look at federalism versus bureaucracy, it's hard to make an argument that doesn't center around the basic human rights being stripped and not allowing for us as citizens to hold the people accountable for making the laws that we're going to follow. So that's it, and I thank you for watching.